How the hell you doing, YouTube? We're back again today with a brand new video. We're going to be patching a ceiling. I'm going to bring you along. Okay, ladies and gents, this video is going to be a bit different as the person that owned this house was actually in the room while I was doing this. So I'm going to just do a wee voiceover and see how this goes, because a lot of the times the people are in, and obviously I feel a bit silly standing talking to the camera while they're watching. But so what we're doing here is I've got a Stanley knife and I'm cutting this as square as possible. The reason I do that is so that I can just cut two or one, but I'm going to cut two bits of board to fit exactly in this space. Maybe a good idea to wear some eye protection when you're working over your head, I guess. As you see, I just got an eye full of dust. But basically we're going to cut it as square as we can get it. Once we cut it square, then we're going to move on to the next step. A good idea when you're cutting out like this, you see here where I'm cutting now, there is a joist. A lot of the times the screw or the nail, whatever they've used to fix it, will be stuck right at the edge, and a lot of the time you have to take the nail out or the screw out, because obviously it's in the way of your new board. If you're going to do that, then I would definitely advise putting an extra screw or two in where you took the old one out, just to reinforce. What I'm doing now is, this is basically the next step. So what I want to do is I'll go around the whole of this plasterboard and I'll just take back. Sometimes it comes off easy, sometimes not, but I usually aim to cut about an inch of the old plaster off. Cut the old plaster off, but leave the plasterboard intact if possible. The reason we do this is, so if I was to put the bit of plasterboard in and just skim over the top of this, there's a high possibility that it would actually crack where the two bits of plasterboard join, butt up against each other. But doing this, cutting a bit of space so that we can put some mesh tape, scrim tape as we call it, always a good idea. I've had a few people asking on some of the other videos, just making requests for things that they would like to see. I'm going to have a lot more videos coming. I've sort of been steady the last load of weeks, sort of uploading either Friday, Saturday or Sunday, one a week. I'm also over on TikTok. If you just want to go and check that out, it's just Danny Surgeoner, Surgeoner Plastering on TikTok. We're doing some videos there also. And then of course you can go and have a look at my business page. It's Surgeoner Plastering on Facebook and on Instagram. Because some people have asked, requested other videos. You get this, as I was talking about, you taking the screws out. As you see, I hammered one home and pulled the other one out. It's just to make sure that your new plasterboard isn't sort of sitting against something and sitting proud to the rest of the ceiling. But as I was saying, the people that are asking for videos, keep doing so. I will be making videos requested by people that watch these ones. Someone had asked me for some hints and tips for plasters which are left-handed, which I am. So I think I'm going to make a video like that. I'm also going to make a video of my mixing setup. So how I set up for mixing beforehand. I solo plaster, so I'm on my own most of the time. And I have a nice system where when I finish mixing, I can get the drill cleaned out within seconds. And then once I finish putting on the skim, then obviously have the bucket cleaned out within seconds, leaving as much time as possible free for actually trialing the stuff up. Obviously, most of the videos so far on the page have been skimming videos, mostly. But we do actually do other things. We do finishing plastering. Now, it's sort of a skilled type, more skilled than plastering, just regular plastering. It's more expensive, so we don't get that many jobs, but it is something we do. We do plasterboarding, which there should be a video up within the next couple of weeks of us stripping an old Victorian house's ceiling, and then overboarding the lath. That'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. We also do render. Now, because I don't have a labourer, I sort of try my best to avoid sand and cement as much as possible. But there will be some sand and cement videos coming up, but mostly all skimming. A lot of the stuff we do is either re-skims or stuff like this, where we're coming to patch after other tradesmen, stuff like that there. This particular job, we had a leak. I think the customer had said a leak from a shower, a newly fitted shower that was directly above here where we're working. So we had to, we didn't cut it out. The plumber that came to fix the leak had cut it out. Hence the shape of it. It was, if it had been us, we'd have cut it just one big square to save on any cutting plasterboard. But you sort of just work with what you've got, really. I I'm just going to run through a few tools. It may be a good idea just while we're cutting around this. So we use, at the minute, we have a battery powered drill. Now, obviously, any drill would do the same job. You could get a drill from Screwfix for probably £60-70. What I'm doing here is I'm just measuring. So I take two measurements. just to make sure that it's the same size. And as you see here, I pull the tape measure out and I'm using my top finger to keep the tape measure at a certain measurement and pulling the bottom just a mark. And then I'm going to cut it with a knife. Just cut the line as straight as we can. If it was bigger bits of plasterboard, we use a plasterboard square. You know, and then obviously you mark the front, snap the board, and then cut the back. And then that's it. When we're cutting boards, what we like to do is just leave them slightly big, just a mil, you know, just enough where it's easily took off with the Stanley knife. But obviously not too much, where it's going to take hours cutting it till shape. So now we've got our bit of plasterboard cut. We're going to screw it up. You'll see here in a wee minute the labourer that I did have working with me. He's here giving me a hand. I should have realistically marked these joists before I put the plasterboard up, but as you'll see, I'll try to screw in a few times and I'll miss. And I think it is important to leave that kind of stuff in, just so that you can see, you know, that it makes more sense. Mark the joists where they're going rather than stand and have to put 4 or 5 screws to find one joist. You always find it better. We're just using an impact driver here. You see there, that's the labour trying to point out where the joist is, and you'll see I'll drive home a few screws here that's just absolutely nowhere near it. We're using an impact driver. Of course, you could use anything, an actual plasterboard screw gun, which are a bit expensive to be fair. Just a regular screwdriver, electric screwdriver obviously. Or if you want to get hammer nails, you can also do it that way and just nail it up. I usually don't advise using nails. Screws are better fixing. I've never had any problem with nails, but it's just always better, I think. Screws are stronger. That's just my opinion. As you see now, we'll get a few screws just to get it sort of to sit there. I'll put one in the corner, and then I think I put another one in. Once it's sitting exactly where we want it, then what I'll do then is I'll get the Stanley knife, as you can see, and I'll start cutting the wee smidge where it's too big. And that all this does is it helps me get the plasterboard as tight as possible till the stuff that's there. And obviously the tighter it is, the less chance you're going to have of it cracking. Not that it matters because we'll be scrim taping, but it's just good practice to have it as tight as you can. I'm just going to start going through the tools again. As I say, we have an electric drill, but sort of any drill you can use. Doing stuff like this, I would advise, you know, we have big massive buckets, but for something like this, you can pick up, I think, a white plasters bucket for £4 or £5 of screw fix, and then another smaller yellow bucket just for putting your water into. At the minute, I think we have 8 black buckets, small ones, just regular builder's buckets. We use them for water. With 2 yellow builder's buckets, we use them for putting water in for washing our tools. We have a white plasters bucket, the one from Screwfix. We use that for cleaning out the drill, and then we have 2 of our big buckets. Both of them are like bin type buckets. They usually take about 3 bags. You can't get 4 bags into them, but it's tight. That's basically what you're going to need for mixing. So we have a small brush for cleaning the drill. We have a scoop for sort of scooping the plaster out of the buckets and putting it on the hawk. these two items aren't necessary, but they do make life easier. And then obviously we have our hawks and trowels. At the minute, the way we do it, so we will apply the plaster, and then we'll close it in. Then we'll cut what I call cutting. It's a blunt Prima shape trowel. I think I've talked about it in another video. It's a blunt Prima shape Marshalltown trowel, which cuts all the high spots and ridges off. And then we have our flexi trowel, which is good for getting things nice and flat and straight, because you can put plenty of pressure, puts a nice shine. And then last of all, we'll have our plastic trowel. We give it a wee go with the plastic trowel at the end, just to make it nice and shiny. Not that the painters are probably thanking us too much for doing so. So we're just going to put the last load of screws just to get the board nice and tight, and then we'll cut the next part. Again, there you can see several times I missed the joists because it didn't mark them. Again, always a good idea to do so. It makes your life so much easier. And then we're going to measure this small piece. As I said, if it was up to me, I'd just cut a square, and then it's just one bit of board set in. But unfortunately, it was the plumber cut it, and they enjoy cutting just exactly where it needs to be. Obviously, maybe they do not as much damage because they're not fixing it. But yeah, so you see me here, the plasterboard sitting right on the edge of this joist, so I'm sort of cross screwing it until the joist to get it to hold. It wasn't easy. And as you see, I'm using sort of the bigger screws here, just keeping an eye on them electrical cables there to make sure I don't go into them. Again, another eye full of stuff. It's always a good idea too, when after you finish screwing your board, is to go around and all these bits of plaster, the old plaster board, just to stick a few extra screws the whole way around, just to tighten everything up, to make sure that there's no movement when you're troweling up. As I said, we're using an impact driver here. This is a Eber air bar. I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, but it's a Screwfix's own brand. Well, no, actually, it's not their own brand, but it's the cheapest brand that they carry other than Titan. And I use the whole system, so every tool I have, bar my mixing drills, all made by these people, and they're sort of cheap. Not too cheap, but cheap enough where it makes sense for a plaster anyway. Like, we don't like putting expensive tools and stuff in our farm because everything gets covered in plaster. So what you see me doing here, now I've fixed all this plasterboard, I'm going to start taping all the joints. So what I'll do is I'll put half of the mesh tape, scrim tape, on the old bit of plasterboard and the other half on the new bit of plasterboard. As you can see here, I'm stapling this stuff, it up there, but that's not a step that's necessary. If you can get it to stick up without having to staple it, then happy days. But I like stapling because I know it's not going to move when I start putting on my stuff. And and obviously all my cracks will be completely covered, and I'm not worrying about it falling off or sliding and moving away from the bit that I'm taping. That stapler was a godsend, really. We staple our beads. Staple scrim tape on. It's a good tool. Well worth its money. Paid for itself. I think I paid £45. And when we're stapling, we're using zinc. I think it's zinc coated staples, which are rust resistant. Obviously, because you don't want rust patches showing, throughout all your plaster. I probably, looking at it again, I probably could have done a better job with the plasterboard. Just cutting that bit that you can see square where the hole is. But taping the scrim tape on it should be okay. And we're just finishing stapling the scrim tape onto the ceiling. Last few bits of scrim tape to be stapled on. At this point, but before I even start prepping the ceiling, that I have everything sitting ready for skimming. So although I have a labourer here and he was the one that got everything set up, if I was on my own, which I am most of the time, I completely set up the skimming, bringing the bags in, sort the water out, and then I'll come in and prep whatever it is that I'm working at. And then once it's prepped, it means I can go straight to skimming. I think it's just, it's better to have everything. Once you've finished setting up, you just want the skim, and then having to try to go in and sort bags and, sort the water out and all that sort of stuff, you just want to get the skimming done. So I set up just beforehand, and as I say, I will be doing a video showing how it is that I set up my skimming area, wherever it is. The good thing about the cordless drill is that I can bring it just in and everything can just be mixed in the room. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll set a crate up in the middle of the room, and then I will mix on the bucket up on the crate, just so I can get out of the bucket off the stilts. Here you can see I'm going around the edge of the old plaster with the PVA. What the PVA does, it stops suction in the old part of the ceiling, but it also helps the plaster stick. Now you can see I'm PVAing over this plasterboard. The only reason I'm doing this is because it was plasterboard the client had there, and it had been sitting for a long time. I think she'd said maybe 6 or 7 months. So I just didn't want to take the chance that it would be, it would be bad suction and stuff on it. So we just put a wee drop of PVA over, and that's basically it. It's ready for skimming. What I like to do is mix up a wee tiny. I'll mix up my bucket full of stuff, and then I'll take a couple of hawkfuls out, and I'll just mix them up on the hawk. Just makes them a wee bit tighter, as you can see, and just push it into the corners as much as possible. The harder stuff's easier to put into the corners than the softer stuff. You know, the softer stuff usually just sort of falls off. So I just mix a wee drop of stuff a wee bit stiffer and push it right in. What it does, it squeezes through the scrim tape. It squeezes through the scrim tape, and it sort of just sticks itself there. And then I'll use the slightly softer stuff just over the top to fill out the obviously the gap where the new plasterboard is. I think this is probably one of the most important steps that a lot of plastering videos that I've seen anyway don't emphasize. A lot of the time, if you're sort of you just throw the plaster over the crack and you don't actually work it in, what it can do is create an air pocket behind it. And then sometimes what happens is later on, usually your next trial, it'll fall out because it's not stuck to the plasterboard and the scrim tape properly. And if you haven't stapled your scrim tape till the ceiling or the wall or whatever it is that you're doing, then what that plaster's falling off is going to do is going to pull the scrim tape with it. And a lot of the time, and I've seen it happen a few times with boys that didn't really have much experience, they'll sort of scrim around a hole like this, and then they'll put the stuff in, they'll put it on, they'll go away and clean the bucket, and they'll come back, and all the scrim tape and all the plaster that was around the edges of the scrim tape just all falls off. I seen a guy one time doing a hip ceiling, and he filled the hip out, and he walked away and left it, waiting for the firm up before he obviously skimmed over it. And because he hadn't pushed the plaster in hard enough, all the plaster came off the ceiling, and pulled every bit of scrim tape that was on that ceiling off. He had every bit of it all touching, so every bit of scrim tape that was touching pulled the next bit down, and he came back and all the plaster was on the floor and all the scrim tape as well. So he basically had to start from scratch again. So now I've filled in all around the edges. You'll see now I've took a wee scoop of stuff from the bucket where the stuff is wet. As you can see, it sort of goes on a lot easier. And then we're just going to fill out sort of the heavier areas in the middle. What you want to do is put enough plaster on to sort of bring it just slightly over flush. So you want just slightly more plaster on than the original ceiling. What this helps you do is when you come to flatten it in, then you can take the excess off. But if you didn't put enough on, then you're sort of trying to get more plaster to fill out, you know, the space. And if you've already cleaned your bucket out, it's an absolute nightmare. So what you do is you just put a wee bit extra on, and that saves you from having to go and pick stuff out of a bag or whatever else. What you'll also see me doing here is I will throw this on, and instead of just giving it a bit of time, I'll flatten it straight away. I like to do that obviously because I've put a bit of extra stuff on, so I just like to get it straightened out as quick as I can. Now I won't clean the edges or anything at this point, but I will get it as flat as possible, and I'll spend a bit of time making sure that it's right before I clean the bucket out and get rid of the excess stuff that we have. Now I'm just going to use the same trowel that I put the stuff on with. I'm just going to take my time and I'm going to flatten it down as much as possible. Now, I'm not going to take it right back, but I'm going to get it as flat as possible. Obviously, if you have a labour or you have a bit of time or whatever, you know, I would leave that till the stuff's a wee bit harder, but I want to get this flattened out because there is an extra drop of stuff on the ceiling. You see what I'm doing here with my fingers, there must have been a bit of grit, or maybe a slightly dirty bag from the builder's yard or something, but there's all little like stones through it, so all I'm doing is just picking the stones out. The builder's yard that we go to, they have a bad habit of drinking tea and setting their tea on top of all the skim bags, and every now and again they'll knock a cup of tea over and all the bags get soaked. So unfortunately stuff like this happens and there's nothing we can do to control it. So sometimes you just have to deal with dirty skim. It's not pleasant. It pulls lines all over the place, but you have to deal with it. I'll concentrate around the edges and I'll take all this excess plaster off, all the stuff that's sort of over the old bits of plaster. So I'll give it as much as possible. I'll scrape that off. You don't sort of, if you want to get it like flat and flush and not be able to see it when it's painted, you can't have no ridges. And if we were to leave this plaster and try to skim it and make it flat, it would never work. You would always see it no matter what. So this stuff you want to scrape off, and then you can sort of see the outline of where the old and the new plasterboard meets. You want that line to be as defined as possible. You want to be able to see where your old and your new plasterboard butts up against each other. Doing this will obviously mean that you're not going to see any difference between your old and your new plaster. It is a hard skill to master, and it probably will take you a few times of doing ceilings, but if you sort of just follow what I'm saying, it will probably work out good for you at least some of the time. What I'll do also is I use my water brush, and I'll clean as much of the old plaster off as possible. At this stage, what I'm using is my cutting trowel. So it's a 14-inch Marshalltown Prima shape, partially worn. It says worn in or something. But you couldn't use it for skimming, but using it for cutting off heavy ridges and stuff, that it's perfect. I'll rub my water brush, making the sort of top layer of plaster have a texture and bringing the moisture to the surface, and then I'll use my trowel with a decent amount of pressure and at a pretty big angle, and I'll put lots of pressure and I'll scrape all the high parts off the ceiling. Again, it's something that you'll only be able to learn actually doing it. You know, it's okay me telling you how to do it, but you have to sort of feel it for to know exactly what I mean. But you'll see, your plaster will go. You'll see it being flat and straight. Probably a good way for you to test whether you've done it right or not would be to get sort of a level or something and just put it up and see is there any ridges or anything. But if you put enough pressure and cut any high spots off, you know, it should be all right. Doing it this way, we use a skim that we have in Ireland, and it sets in I think it's 3 hours. It's just its normal setting time. It's called Carlite. It's ultra finish, and it sets in 3 hours. Things like this where there was no second coat, everything was out of the first bucket. You know, it's rapid, so you have to keep an eye on it. But for you guys in England, stuff, I think British Gypsum do a fast setting plaster now. Not sure of the name of it. It's a white bag. I'm sure that you should be using that for sort of smaller stuff like this, and you won't really be wanting the 4 or 5 hour setting time of the multi finish. And if possible, get the Carlite over there. It's superior plaster. I find multi finish is like super gritty. With this stuff, there's no grit on it whatsoever. So basically what we're going to be doing now is hitting its last trowel. It's firmed up enough where we're going to be able to flex it. This is a Rafina, I think it's an 18-inch Superflex 2. Superflex 2, I'm 90% sure. So it's just the same process again. We'll get our water brush, we'll rub round, we'll bring as much fat to the surface as possible. At this point you're not going to get much fat. There's going to be more water than fat, but the same again, this is the trowel where you're going to just make sure that all your holes are filled in. You shouldn't have any holes at this point, but this is where you just want to take extra care and have a good hard look to make sure that there's sort of no holes. And then we're just doing the same thing where we're going to trowel both ways. So we'll trowel back and forward, and then we will take our trowel and we'll come across the ceiling. At this stage where I know it probably doesn't look like there's much pressure being put on here, but I'm sort of putting plenty of pressure with a decent angle on the trowel to get it as smooth and as flat as we can. And we're just filling out any high spots, any stuff like that there, just making sure everything's complete and nice and tidy, basically. As you can see there, this the reason I knew that this was ready. You could see sort of like the black pattern on the ceiling. We call that like going black, or it's starting to turn. And that's the reason I started the trowel, because I sort of knew that it was starting to turn. Here's a closer look. You can see the black spots. I give this one more trowel. The reason I done that was because I just wasn't 100% happy that it was right. I hit it just slightly too early, so I just give it another trowel. If you like the video, guys, feel free to give it a like, comment, let me know what other videos you just want me to do. Subscribe, go and check out my social media. All the links will be in the description of this video. Go and check out my TikTok, my Facebook, just anywhere. Any questions, drop me a PM or a DM, or just read them in the comments below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.